This is Part 3, Episode 123. The Mingdo mountain range was still deathly quiet, and there were all sorts of aerial surveillance soul tools flying rhythmically in the background. Hui Yuhao could feel both intense excitement and anxiety, and his senses were elevated continuously in this moment. He could even feel that his potential was being unleashed continuously under such circumstances. It'd be fantastic if I could continue in such a state. Hui Yuhao understood that his cultivation would probably improve once more after he succeeded in this mission. 2,000 meters, 1,800 meters, 1,500 meters, 1,300 meters, 1,200 meters. Hui Yuhao paused when he was 1,200 meters away from the main peak. He wasn't hasty to push forward, and neither did he release any spiritual detection. Instead, he relied only on his eyes to look up at the peak. His spirit eyes were at the highest possible level of the purple demon eyes, even without support from his spiritual power. He could see many things clearly in the darkness, even from 1,200 meters away. Hui Yuhao discovered that there were not that many soul tools installed on the Mingdo mountain range's main peak. Instead, there were relatively more soul tools installed on the two peaks beside it. A large region of the main peak's tip was covered by metal, and there were many strange-looking metal shells constructed on it. These metal shells were undoubtedly the best cover for the soul tools within. Hui Yuhao memorized every single one of their positions in his heart. Even if his mission failed in the end, memorizing these positions accurately would still be very useful. At the same time, he relied on his own observations to judge where the Death God was located. He was scouting out the Death God, and it would be best if he could damage or destroy it, as that was the most important aim of his expedition. The Death God wasn't difficult to find. Hui Yuhao quickly saw the hemispherical metal dome on the main peak's tip. This metal dome was about 10 meters in diameter, and it was completely metal gray in color. It wasn't eye-catching or obvious at all whether it was day or night, but Hui Yuhao could feel his soul shaking when he saw it. Hui Yuhao's senses were still very perceptive even though the metal dome wasn't releasing any soul power undulations. What is this? It's clearly a terrifying pressure naturally produced by something terrifying. It should be there. I will have completed half of my task if I can get close to it. The Death God was powerful, but it was positioned strategically, and it wouldn't achieve its desired effect if one actually got close to it. The Death God was better at attacking from long range no matter how powerful it was, and it wasn't all powerful. Hui Yuhao took a deep breath and began to move once more. He held his breath, and edged forward bit by bit. Rose gold colors flickered in his eye of destiny as he stared at what was in front of him. The spiritual barrier didn't have any shape or form, and even Hui Yuhao couldn't detect the spiritual barrier using his spiritual power without touching it. However, he would immediately be discovered if he touched it. 1,200 meters, 1,100 meters, 1,050 meters. He pushed on bit by bit, until he was almost there. Hui Yuhao paused when he was about 1,020 meters away from the main peak. Hui Yuhao had relied entirely on his memory from his previous expedition to reach this point, but he was unable to be sure about the last few dozen meters. He was taking a risk, so he decided to keep his risk within a controllable range. Hui Yuhao quietly removed the leather wings on his body, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He had originally thought that he would need a lot more effort to close the gap, as there were likely to be oscillation detectors on the mountaintop, after all. However, the Sun-Moon Empire was evidently very confident after transforming the surveillance soul tools on the outer layer. The mountain's oscillation detectors were all placed on the outside, and there were no other surveillance soul tools on the inside except for the spiritual barrier. His eye of destiny became increasingly bright as Hui Yuhao's spiritual power flourished more and more. The light around Hui Yuhao began to contort faintly as large amounts of spiritual power were unleashed. Spiritual blast? A low growl came out of Hui Yuhao's mouth. The air in front of him began to sizzle as if it were boiling, and soundless booms abruptly exploded within 10 meters around him. This was a spiritual type attack with an area of effect. The spiritual barrier that was hidden 1,000 meters from the main peak was finally triggered. It released a dull hum as it appeared roughly 10 meters away from Hui Yuhao. The spiritual barrier rippled intensely under the effects of his spiritual blast. BRNG. BRNG. Shrill alarm sounds immediately rang out on the mountaintop. Hui Yuhao's expression didn't change. At this point in time, there was no longer any meaning in using imitation to conceal his position. Gold and purple light flashed in his eye of destiny on his forehead, and a purplish gold beam of light blasted out from it as the sky was gradually tinted rose gold, while blinding light collided ferociously with the spiritual barrier. One had to know that the manic bull Doluo Wang Yihang took a big hit back then from Hui Yuhao's attack, and his defensive spiritual type soul tool was directly shattered. Even though the spiritual barrier around the Mingdou mountain range's main peak was powerful, the main problem with it was that it covered an area that was far too large. Therefore, any localized position's defensive strength couldn't reach the standard of a Class 9 soul tool. Whoosh, a hole that was 1 meter in diameter appeared on the spiritual barrier as it popped open like a pierced balloon. However, this spiritual barrier was impressive. It swiftly stretched out to cover the gaps after it had been broken through. Hui Yuhao couldn't possibly let such an opportunity go, and light spurted from his flying-type soul tool as he transformed into a beam of light and darted through the hole he had created. He didn't touch the spiritual barrier at all. Hui Yuhao's life could end in an instant as he came within 1,000 meters of the main peak. How could he allow himself to be dazed after touching the spiritual barrier? Light glowed on the main peak, and even the stones began to shift in some places. Metal shells split open on the mountaintop, revealing the soul tools inside. Hui Yuhao didn't have to use spiritual detection to feel that large amounts of soul tools were locked onto him. Beams of light instantly began to twist around Hui Yuhao's body. Spiritual interference. The 3 pairs of wings on his back roared at maximum capacity at the same time, and he channeled as much soul power as he could. In addition to the 2 rows of soul thrusters firing off, everything propelled him like a shooting star as he went directly for the main peak. He was going right for the death god. Hui Yuhao stretched out his spiritual detection to every corner once he was inside the spiritual barrier. His main target was still the mountaintop. He wanted to see what the death god was exactly. A conical soul tool gradually protruded from within the hemispherical shell. This soul tool was dark red, and the light from all the soul tools around it seemed to dim in the moment that it appeared. Frightening soul power undulations rippled out from it, and once Hui Yuhao's spiritual power touched it, an intense and piercing pain appeared deep in his spirit. Hui Yuhao howled in agony, and was almost unable to control himself as he nearly fell. He retracted his spiritual detection as if he had just touched red-hot metal. This was the first time that Hui Yuhao had experienced something like this. He didn't cut such a sorry figure even when he was facing the beast god. That is. Hui Yuhao effortfully channeled his soul and spiritual power as his expression changed to one of terror, and at the same time, he tried his best to keep his balance. Light from the soul tools on the mountaintop erupted at the same time. Large masses of soul rays and cannon shells blanketed toward Hui Yuhao. They didn't care about his spiritual interference domain, they just launched attacks over an enormous area. Hui Yuhao retracted his spiritual detection very quickly. Even though that intense pain was still splitting his head open, he couldn't care about that at this moment. He kept his spiritual detection within a certain range around his body as he flickered continuously. He didn't charge forward toward the main peak anymore. Instead, he swiftly plummeted downward. Evading all those fatal attacks first was the wisest move. The Skydream Iceworm's spiritual origin began to take effect in Hui Yuhao's mind as gentle spiritual power nourished his spiritual seed to lessen his suffering. However, Hui Yuhao was severely affected by that moment he came into contact with that thing. His body still slowed a little, and he still didn't evade one of the soul rays. That soul ray struck the side of his arm, and the hit made him spin in midair like a top. It was a Class 7 soul ray. Fortunately, he had his solo battle armor protecting him. Otherwise, no matter how powerful he was, he would have been injured from that hit. The situation was worse than he had thought, and the most important factor to everything was that the death god's strength exceeded Hui Yuhao's expectations. In this moment, the dark red pointy tower was completely erect as faint dark red light rotated around it. However, it didn't fire at him. It was clear that, for the person who was controlling the death god, Hui Yuhao was not worthy of firing the death god. Just as Hui Yuhao was placed at a complete disadvantage and was about to use instant teleportation to defuse the situation, purple beam of light suddenly glowed from behind his back as a series of crackling sounds appeared in the sky. A patch of soul cannon shells that were sweeping over were detonated as they exploded in a patch in the sky. A gentle strength pulled on Hui Yuhao and dragged him horizontally, out of the explosion's epicenter. A slender figure appeared from thin air behind him, and Hui Yuhao was stunned speechless when he looked up. The person who had suddenly appeared to save him was, to his immense surprise, Tang Wutong. She was very glamorous in this moment as her radiant dragon butterfly's wings stretched out behind her. There was no doubt that she was the one who had released that purple light. "How can you be here?" Hui Yuhao couldn't help but ask. Not in his wildest dreams did he expect that Tang Wutong would follow him here. However, he didn't sense anything at all before this. This was just unbelievable. Tang Wutong giggled and said, "That's nothing. I have an innate skill, and I followed you inside, that's all. You would have been target practice if it hadn't been for me. What do we do next?" Hui Yuhao couldn't be bothered with asking Tang Wutong what innate skill that was. At the same time, her timely intervention and delay gave the Sky Dream Ice Worm enough time to alleviate the stabbing pain in his spiritual sea. Hui Yuhao dragged Tang Wutong and swiftly pulled her towards the mountain's peak. It seems impossible to chase her away at this point. I can only continue on to complete the task, and try my best to survive amongst all the dangers. Your guts are too big. Hui Yuhao growled angrily as he accelerated towards the mountain's peak at his fastest possible speed. No wonder she was keeping quiet the entire time, and didn't make a sound when everyone else was requesting to participate in this expedition. She had already made her plans. Hui Yuhao was very calm before, but now he was starting to feel a little frantic. Their enemies didn't care what state of mind they were in. Soul rays crisscrossed like a web of a death as they continued sweeping toward the two of them. These were all soul rays that were class 7 or above, and they were likely to be locked on if they were struck even once. Hui Yuhao unleashed his spiritual interference domain and spiritual detection to their highest possible levels. He dragged Tang Wutong as they dodged and waltzed through the air, and they continued flying closer to the mountain peak. They had to get onto the mountain. Hui Yuhao was 1,000 meters away when he began his charge, and now only 500 meters remained. His plan would have a chance of success as long as he charged through the last 500 meters. 400 meters. Just as Hui Yuhao was relying on his tremendous speed and judgment ability to continue pushing forward, a spherical soul tool on the mountaintop suddenly released a layer of orange-red light. This layer of light expanded outward, and quickly became a film of light. Hui Yuhao could evade soul rays and cannon shells, but such area attacks that locked down every angle were futile as well. Chilly lights flickered in his eyes as he swung his right hand unparalleled chill, Emperor's sword. Dark blue sword light burst into the world as it slashed ferociously onto the film, and what exceeded everyone's expectations was the fact that it was actually slashed open. However, it still collided with Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong's bodies, but it didn't explode. This is... Hui Yuhao's eyes closed into slits. This is evidently a light of resistance. Yes, it's a light of resistance. This thing doesn't have any offensive power in itself, but it's very tenacious and uses propulsion to push its enemies further away. This was a soul tool that soul engineers typically used in battles against soul masters. Except this was the first time that he had seen a light of resistance with such a large area of effect. Who's this maniac who made a light of resistance into a class 7 soul tool? His frustrations couldn't solve his problems. The two of them were directly pushed from 400 meters back to 600 meters after they were struck by the light of resistance. Hui Yuhao would have been pushed even further if he hadn't used his full strength to stabilize himself. Tang Wutong wasn't idle as she flapped her wings continuously while she pushed out beam after beam of dragon-shaped air flows and dispelled every attack that was most likely to threaten them. At this moment, the Sun-Moon Empire seemed to have readjusted themselves. Shadow after shadow emerged from the mountaintop not far away, and they were all flying towards the two of them. The surveillance soul tools that were originally behind them turned around and began to unleash wave after wave in their direction. Hui Yuhao's spiritual detection domain was about to be affected by those oscillation detectors. Even though his powerful spiritual power could also in turn affect those oscillation detectors, Hui Yuhao's reach and range was much smaller. Hui Yuhao regained his calm as he was faced with such a situation. He turned towards Tang Wutong and growled, "I'm going to send you onto the mountain. Afterwards, you will unleash destruction up there as much as you can. Don't care about me. Do you understand?" Yes, Tang Wutong didn't waste any words as she immediately agreed. Hui Yuhao pulled Tang Wutong to him and wrapped his hands around her. Tang Wutong's slender waist was very bouncy, but it was a pity that Hui Yuhao couldn't feel anything because he was clad in his solo battle armor. Tang Wutong blushed. She didn't know what Hui Yuhao was trying to do right now, but this was the second time that she had found herself in his arms. She wasn't angry like she was the last time, and realized to her surprise that she wasn't even too embarrassed. "Take care of yourself, and find one person for me." Hui Yuhao hollered as blue light erupted from his solo battle armor in the next moment. The blue lights flashed as they enveloped Tang Wutong, and her elegant frame was propelled from his body like a cannon shell in the next moment. An ability that came with the solo battle armor, transport. This ability allowed Hui Yuhao to transform his soul power to envelope any physical body before propelling it out. The force of this propulsion was extremely large, but it wouldn't harm the transported body at all. The reason why this soul skill was installed on his solo battle armor was so that he could help his teammates reach their designated positions during group battles. This ability was unique to Xianzhuan, and the Sun Moon Empire didn't have any soul engineers who could craft soul transporters. After Tang Wutong's body was propelled toward the mountain, the soul power that was pushing her forward naturally transformed into a protective layer. She was moving almost as fast as a cannon shell. The Sun Moon Empire evidently didn't expect Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong to have such a burst of speed after being pushed back by their light of resistance. This explosion of speed was comparable to that of a titled Dolor. However, Hui Yuhao became target practice after Tang Wutong was gone. Tremendous masses of cannon shells and soul rays swept in his direction. The oscillation detectors behind Hui Yuhao had completed their sweep on him at the same time. Even though they couldn't lock onto him precisely, they could reduce the size of his rough location to 10% of the area they were targeting before. Therefore, Hui Yuhao was entirely trapped in a barrage of attacks. Hui Yuhao vanished into thin air with a flash of light, and reappeared 50 meters away. Instant teleportation. This soul skill couldn't be used repeatedly, but Hui Yuhao finally used it at that crucial moment. Tang Wutong had already closed in on the main peak. The attacking soul tools were targeted at Hui Yuhao before this, and thus there actually weren't any attacks that locked onto her position at this moment. Most of the defensive soul tools on the main peak would lose their effectiveness once she arrived on the main peak. Hui Yuhao could feel that some soul tools that were class 8 or above were done charging, and he would have to face a truly unstoppable fusillade in the next moment. Quick, Wutong! He needed Tang Wutong to find an enemy for him, with which he would use the Xuanwu displacement that he had duplicated from Shusancha to switch himself over. Hui Yuhao's eyes suddenly closed into slits at this moment, and his eyes were overcome with fear. The reason was because a beam of dark red was soundlessly fired from that dark red pointy tower that was fully erected, and it was going straight for Tang Wutong. The death god is attacking Wutong. Hui Yuhao could feel goosebumps break out over his body. Even though he knew Tang Wutong wasn't Wang Donga, they looked identical after all. Furthermore, he was still holding onto a thread of hope in his heart that they were one and the same. Hui Yuhao had seen how powerful the death god was when it unleashed its power. Back then, a blinding patch of white had appeared, but the light beam was red this time, and it didn't seem like it could cover as large an area as the white light from before could reach. However, how could he let Tang Wutong be struck by an attack such as this? He almost didn't hesitate as he unleashed the soul skill that he had duplicated, Xuanwu displacement. Lights flashed, and Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong switched places. Tang Wutong also realized what was happening when the dark red beam blasted out. A stifling sensation coursed throughout her body, and she lowered her head subconsciously to look, but the red beam was already in front of her. Tang Wutong felt as if all the blood in her body was frozen in that moment, and agonizing howls rang out in her ears, as if she had descended into purgatory. However, the pressure around her suddenly vanished entirely in the next moment, and even everything that was in front of her eyes had changed. Hui Yuhao was looking toward her before this. Therefore, the first thing Tang Wutong saw after he used Xuanwu displacement was a red beam swallowing his entire body. No! A shrill scream broke the air. Tang Wutong felt as if that dark red beam didn't fall onto Hui Yuhao. Instead, she felt as if it had pierced her heart. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't breathe at that moment, and she flapped her wings hysterically as he raced toward Hui Yuhao. However, the cannon fire that was concentrated on Hui Yuhao before this closed in on her. She didn't have spiritual interference domain, so she was directly locked onto. A sharp cry could be heard as Tang Wutong's seventh soul ring glowed radiant dragon butterfly true body. She transformed into a purple beam of light, and she became completely illusory to all the soul tools that had locked onto her. An intense and indescribable golden beam erupted from her body in the next moment. A golden trident shone brilliantly on her forehead, and golden light flashed once before she forcefully broke out from all the cannon fire as she bolted directly toward the mountaintop. Everything was barren and deathly silent. Xu Sanxia, Jiang Nannan, Ji Juichen, Jing Ziyan, Yi Gai, and Nan Qiuqiu were all waiting here quietly. They had already been here long before Hui Yuhao had set off. There were 13 soul masters of varying ages with them, but every single one of them were powerful titled Dolor. There were even 2 transcendent Dolor amongst them. Hui Yuhao definitely couldn't destroy the Mingdou mountain range's main peak all by himself. The attacking plan that he and the White Tiger Duke had devised was simple. He would bring every single one of them onto the main peak. There were some things that Hui Yuhao couldn't do, but if more than 10 titled Dolor combined their strength to do those things, then the result would be very different. Once they were within range of the main peak, and once titled Dolor unleashed their full fighting strength, their combined power wasn't something those close-range soul tools' defensive perimeter could resist. They would achieve victory amidst the dangers. However, this plan had a prerequisite, and that was that Hui Yuhao had to be able to rush onto the main peak and buy enough time to release the others. There was no doubt that Xu Sanxia and the others were no longer on the Dolor continent. They were in Hui Yuhao's spectral demiplane. Nobody could feel any undead inside the spectral demiplane, as Hui Yuhao had scattered the undead creatures far away beforehand. Hui Yuhao had used his spectral demiplane before when he was rescuing the White Tiger Duke, and this time, even though the White Tiger Duke would suspect him, Hui Yuhao couldn't be bothered with that, as they needed to break through the Mingdou mountain range's defenses. The White Tiger Duke would have suspected him a long time ago if not for the fact that he was still young. That was the reason why his thoughts were a little different when he was escorting Hui Yuhao into the air. From the White Tiger Duke's perspective, Hui Yuhao was likely to be a disciple of the person who had saved him. Perhaps the person who had saved him came from Shrek Academy. Waiting was a kind of torture. Xu Sanxia and the others had already been waiting for a long time. There was a dark door not far from them. Hui Yuhao had told them that if they didn't hear his call within 2 hours, then they had to charge out from this door. Almost an hour had passed, but they still hadn't received any news at all. Sanxia, do you think Yuhao is in trouble? Why do I feel like something is not right with this place of his? Jiang Nannan whispered to Xu Sanxia, who was beside her. Xu Sanxia was momentarily stunned. What's wrong? Since Yuhao has allowed us to participate in this operation, there shouldn't be a problem. Look, we have more than 10 titled Dolor with us, and we have to rely on their strength to complete our mission. Yuhao can't have lied to us. Jiang Nannan forced a laugh and said, the reason I think something is wrong is because of these titled Dolor. Think about it, what will happen if this operation fails? Won't everyone be completely stuck in this place without his call? That can't be the case, because he's left this dark door for us. But where does this door lead? If his mission has failed, he can't possibly let these titled Dolor rush out into our enemy's cannon fire. I'm afraid that this door leads us directly back into our camp. Xu Sanxia was rendered speechless for a while as he listened to Jiang Nannan's words. His facial expression gradually turned black after a few moments as he snapped around at Jiang Nannan and growled, why didn't you say this earlier? Jiang Nannan looked very aggrieved. It only just came to me. It seems like Yuhao isn't confident at all. We have all been tricked. No wonder I felt as if something wasn't right when he agreed so readily. What should we do now? Xu Sanxia rubbed his fists and said, we have to wait, that's the only thing we can do. If this door leads back to our camp, then walking out now will mean we no longer have an opportunity to help him. We can only pray that his mission is a success. That little rascal is putting himself in danger once again. Inside the commander's tent of the Star Luo Empire's Northwestern Field Army, there were several dozen Soul Masters standing quietly inside the commander's tent. The White Tiger Duke was sitting in the main commander's seat, and Princess Jojo was sitting beside him. They were all waiting quietly for news to arrive. There was a dark door conjured not far from the White Tiger Duke. Huayu Hao had left this behind before he left. He told the White Tiger Duke that even if his mission wasn't successful, he wouldn't incur any losses for the army at all, and going through with their conservative plan was enough. The White Tiger Duke was clear that Huayu Hao no longer cared about his safety when he said those words, and when those titled Dolua walked out from this door, it would mean that Huayu Hao had paid with his life in this operation. The Soul Master Legions would complete the rest of their offensive, and all 8 Soul Master Legions were ready. All they were waiting for was the signal from the front lines. Xu Jiujiu tried her best to remain calm, and she sat beside the White Tiger Duke in silence. However, everyone could feel the stifling pressure in the atmosphere. The White Tiger Duke and Princess Jojo undoubtedly felt the greatest pressure, because they were the only ones who knew about the news that came from the Heavenly Soul Empire. If their mission was unsuccessful, then the Star Luo Empire would be pushed into a completely passive position. All they could do was pray for Huayu Hao. Dai Yuehang and Dai Luoli were both standing behind the White Tiger Duke. Dai Yuehang's eyebrows were slightly furrowed, as if he were thinking about something, while Dai Luoli's eyes were flickering faintly. The White Tiger Duke and Princess Jojo knew about the secret news that came from the Heavenly Soul Empire, and he knew yet another secret. He knew the secret of Huayu Hao's identity. Huayu Hao had gone to look for him this morning. How are things, Luoli? How has your cultivation been recently? Why are you here, brother? Are you here to give me some pointers? Dai Luoli stared at Huayu Hao, who had lifted his tent's curtain and was walking in, and he couldn't help but greet him excitedly. Huayu Hao shook his head with a faint smile on his face and said, "Eh? You want to be beaten up again?" Dai Luoli blushed and said, "Being beaten up isn't a bad thing, actually. My improvements were the fastest when you were beating me up. Brother, you have to promise me to get me one of those spirits. We can do that once this war is over. Even though I have been bottlenecked at rank 40 because I lack an extra soul ring, I can feel that I have been improving very quickly recently." Huayu Hao chuckled and said, "That's good. Don't worry, spirits won't be a problem as long as you're willing to put in effort. Right, I came here to find you because there's something I have to tell you." "What?" Dai Luoli asked curiously. Huayu Hao said plainly, "I am going on a mission tonight, and I may not return. I haven't decided yet. If I don't return, then you can tell him about my secrets." "Eh? What mission are you going to execute? Will it be dangerous? Who and what do you want me to tell?" Huayu Hao walked in front of Dai Luoli and rubbed his head gently. "It's not dangerous. What I meant was that you can tell your father about my identity." Dai Luoli trembled. "You figured it out?" Huayu Hao smiled and said, "If I don't return, it means I've figured it out. I just don't want to face him." "But if you leave, then when will we meet again?" Dai Luoli said hurriedly. Huayu Hao was momentarily stunned. "We'll meet again if fate allows it." Dai Luoli was thinking about every word that Huayu Hao had said to him, and he could feel his heart slowly tensing up. Is the mission really not dangerous? If the mission isn't dangerous, then why would my father wait here with such a formidable force? Neither he nor Dai Yuehang knew what kind of order their father would give next, but Dai Luoli could guess that everything that was happening had something to do with Huayu Hao. "You can't let anything happen to you, brother." Everything around him was dark red, and a strange force surged into Huayu Hao's body from all directions. He felt, in that moment, as if there were countless avenging spirits that were about to tear his body apart, and were about to swallow his spirit. He couldn't feel anything else around him except for all the dark red colors. Yes, this was the Death God's power. Even though this wasn't its complete version, this power seemed enough to deal with him. Hu Yuhao could almost feel that his body was being torn apart by this sinister and terrifying strength, and his life energy was swiftly seeping away as his spiritual seed gradually crumbled. Am I going to die? Countless images surfaced in Hu Yuhao's mind at this moment. His mother's gentle eyes, and her yearning gaze before her death. Dong's arrogant demeanor when she was dressed in men's clothes, and how tender she was afterwards. Father, father, yes, and my father. I don't know if my death will make him sad. He set his own son on a path of death with his own hands, and perhaps this is the best vengeance that he deserves. If he doesn't care. Hu Yuhao clenched his fists tightly, and the tiger's tooth pierced into his palm. However, he regretted nothing in this moment. Is everything going to end just like this? Mother, I'm coming to find you. Suddenly, an icy cold aura rose up. Hu Yuhao had already lost all hope when he felt an incredibly strong power burst forth from his body and forcefully chase away all the avenging spirits that had invaded his body. That clean and cool feeling appeared first in his chest before it stretched over his torso, as wave of flourishing life energy took this opportunity to spurt from his body. That was the power of the Life Guardian blade. Scales that were as black as night swiftly covered his entire body. The dark red light had long disappeared, but Hu Yuhao hadn't been reduced to flying dust. Instead, he was plummeting down right at a mountain peak not far away. His solo battle armor had been melted away into nothingness, and all he had left at this moment was armor of black scales. Fortunately, he didn't bring out his starlight sapphire ring. This was actually the thought that had occurred to him despite his circumstances. The Great Star Doe Forest's Lake of Life. The clear and transparent lake water suddenly turned black, and an indignant dragon roar could be heard in the next moment. An enormous dragon head that was several tens of meters in diameter emerged from the lake's surface. The dragon head was as black as ink, but its eyes were bright gold. Except, there were faint traces of blood amidst all that golden radiance. Roar, the dragon's maw opened as a dark red sphere erupted from within it. After this dark red sphere emerged, countless images of avenging spirits appeared in the sky as the sphere dissipated, and these avenging spirits howled in agony as the sphere vanished. The dragon's golden eyes became clear once more after it expelled this dark red air sphere. So powerful. So brutal. Is this a weapon humans created with avenging spirits? This video will end here.